Hello and welcome to Bishop Talk. This is Robert Griffin with the Global Justice Institute and also the Executive Minister at the Sunshine Cathedral in Fort Lauderdale. Bishop Talk is one of the shows that I do where I invite people to come on and talk about various issues that are facing us from a religious perspective or a political perspective, a global perspective, and how they are impacting our lives literally today. And we have seen a lot of different impact of life recently, from natural disasters to political administrations and things that happen both nationally as well as globally. And for this particular topic, I could think of no one better than my mentor, my professor, my friend, and my colleague, Dr. Valerie Batts of 20 years, to bring on to talk about some of the things that we're going to talk about today. Dr. Batts and I met when I was in seminary at the Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge, where the Visions Office at that time was located. And I actually did my internship with the Vision Office under Dr. Batts' tutelage. And so a lot of what I know around anti-racism and around a lot of those programs not only came from my studies at the Episcopal Divinity School, but all through Visions that Dr. Batts organized and formed as an institute. And 20 years later, the teachings of that program still has an impact on me and also some colleagues that I work with daily. So welcome, Dr. Batts, and thank you for being with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Robert, and for your continued commitment to this work. And it's also always good to hear how the work might be still alive in the world, because as you've already alluded to, we clearly need it.
Yeah.
So thank you
Uh,
for having me.
So, Dr. Bass, I don't do people resumes for them. I don't do people background. I just invite my guests to say, tell us and the viewers what you want us to know about you from your background before we get our discussion today.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I was born in Eastern North Carolina, Rocky Mount, North Carolina, in the 50s, 1952 to be exact. And at that point, legalized segregation was still the law of the land in the South. So my life experience was shaped by those early years. I went to a desegregated high school my senior year, 1969. And that kind of those early experiences actually shaped who I have become. Um, I went to undergraduate school and studied psychology, which um, gave me information about how race and other variables, social variables, impact human beings.
Mm.
So I became interested in clinical psychology with the goal of helping people, helping the worried well figure out how to uh, feel free and not feel confined, even in the context of segregation.
Mm.
So it's really, as I look back on my life, I think, speaking from a spiritual point of view, I guess if you think about it, like people are put here for certain things, I often feel like I was put here to carry this particular message. And it's not easy. I know you know, when I think about the life that we lived, our parents did an amazing job of keeping us feeling safe,
Mm.
even as the world was actually really quite scary in the 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that one of the other things that I think is so amazing is how those of us who are the descendants of enslaved people and of Native people, um, and the mixture of the European that was there, that
Mm-hmm.
we have been so resilient over these years. And I often remember times when things would seem hard. I remember after Emmett Till's killing, things got harder for my
Mm.
parents because people were afraid.
Yeah.
But we would always talk about, well, it's better than it was when Grandma Lisa was coming up. So there was always this sense of you can do this and don't let yourself be. And it's so interesting because as a child, I didn't realize how liberating that can be,
Mm.
because it was like they were basically saying, yes, it's bad, but you don't have to give up, and you don't have to take that in. And so as I've worked as a therapist over the years, I've often listened for how might people's cultural scripts about their not okayness
Mm.
be a part of whatever depression or anxiety or issue that they're bringing to the table.
Right.
Because back to the conversation we were having before we started, at the cultural level, the message of not okayness has been so pervasive for us as women, as GLBT folks, as any place that's historically excluded.
Yeah.
There is a cultural level of message that can impact our mental health.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have definitely laid the foundational work for so many of us to kind of read from, study from, and grow from just from the work you've done. And you've been, I mean, I've known you for 20 years, but you've been at this a lot longer.
Yeah, we started Visions in 1984,
84.
1984. And in
And
1984, people would say, "Why are you talking about this?" Because we were in one of those lulls
yeah,
where we thought we're moving forward, right? That arc is bending in the right direction.
yeah,
And it was really sad for me because of my research in graduate school. I knew that we hadn't gone very far because the research showed even then 25 to 30% of white Americans didn't change their attitudes. It's just
wow.
that the laws changed and so they couldn't act on them.
Right,
We
right.
have to remember that we didn't do. I argue that we didn't do, and Martin Luther King spoke about this to the American psychologists in 1967,
Mm,
and I can send you the clip because it's published in the American Psychologist magazine, and it says when this speech was on its way to the galleys, King was assassinated. So
wow.
and in this speech he speaks about what I'm discussing, that as people of goodwill and who want for us to be a healthy nation,
Yeah,
those that doesn't go with racism and other
right.
kinds of oppression.
Yeah. I was born in 1967 in Alabama. So,
Okay.
I think that's one of those bonding things that I shared with you and Vision's work,
Hmm.
a lot of anti-racist work over the years. And so,
Hmm.
I have always considered myself to be one of those products of living the dream and a benefit from the dream.
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
now when I think about the dream, it's almost like we're having to redream again in so many different ways about what we want our future to look like and how
Hmm.
do we as a people, as a race, and begin to address a lot of things that we're seeing in front of our faces right now. But I know one of the people who you are passionate about, I believe, is Cesar Chavez.
Yes,
And
yes, yes.
so I want to dive into some of the work around Cesar Chavez and the impact that his work had on you around his work around movements, his work around labor stuff, and his kind of his call to action. Uh,
Yes, yes.
I think you also met him at one point, right?
Yes, 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 yes,
Okay,
yes,
so let's talk about
yes,
Cesar Chavez.
yes, 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 yes. Yeah, it's so, I have to say I've been lucky in my life. And with all I've had a lot of trauma, but I've had a lot of luck. And when I was in second year of college, I got the opportunity to go to the National YWCA's convention, and it was in San Diego, California. And I went with a white woman labor organizer from UNC Chapel Hill, who was the head of our YWCA. And she was an activist and a labor organizer and all of that. And she took me to this conference. I was part of the communications wing of the Black Student Movement or something, and she wanted me to see this world. I had never been on a plane. I never done it. So it was amazing life, changing experience in many ways. But the keynote speaker was Cesar Chavez.
Wow.
And so this was the YWCA had an imperative. I don't know if they still do, but it was to eliminate racism by any means necessary.
Mm,
They decided that in 1970. That was their board's decision. All white Christian organizations saying we're going to do this, which was ahead of their time. Yes. And so this conference was in 72, and part of the theme was, are we going to stick with this commitment?
mm,
So the organizers had invited Cesar Chavez to speak about organizing and what they were doing with the farm workers. And it was so amazing because it really I just could see that my life was going to be something about organizing in some way
mm,
and education, because he gave just so many facts about the differences, the disparities, the economic disparities, and all of that. So having heard him speak, after the speech, they had us in caucus groups, and the white women couldn't figure out why do we need a caucus group? They were like, we want to go know what's your problem? What do you need? And that was when I started learning about the fact that many whites were engaging in the work at that time who were quote unquote liberal
mm.
to help other people, not seeing that racism hurts. All these isms hurt all of us, right?
Right.
So so that was so eye-opening for me, and it helped me to begin to think about what is the difference between internalized oppression
Mm,
and and racism, and what and how does racism, or how does how does my Christian privilege negatively impact
mhm.
me and my understanding of other religions? So just the fact that as human beings, each of us is impacted by oppression, even if we're the beneficiaries.
Right.
And yet, because of the way the society is structured, we don't have to see that.
And it seemed like Cesar Chavez's movement, the call to action, aligned with some civil rights movement calls to action.
Mhm.
You were kind of in the frying pan, if you will.
Yeah,
We
right,
did some stuff from the front seat.
right,
So,
right.
what would you? I mean, I'm just curious more about what's. I mean, this is a labor guy. He's out there advocating for immigrants. Really, he's advocating for better wages. He's advocating for things across the board. So, you're wedged between both of them.
Yes, yes, yes.
What would you
And
say the probably the most profound front row thing that you saw maybe merge between you, those two works or those two movements?
well, the other, what comes to my mind immediately as you ask that question is that a few years earlier, see, I was born in 52, so I was 12 in 67.
Hmm.
And Martin, I've met, I was present outside of Martin Luther King speaking in Rocky Mount in 1962.
Okay.
I was 10 years old. And ironically, that was the night when we were moving from the part of town where my father had been born to the other part of moving up, to
Showing
the
up.
middle class black neighborhood, which was built by a black architect, last black architect in Rocky Mount. And so it was a really, it was an up and coming time, like you say. We were like, yes, because it's coming to an end. And King was traveling around to small southern towns back then, organizing as well. So when he came to Rocky Mount, it was so crowded that we lived like 2 blocks from the high school where he was speaking, but it was so crowded we couldn't get in. But they had a big loudspeaker outside, so we got to hear him
Right.
speak. And my father was in there, so he told us but it was just like that was happening. So I was already attuned to the fact that class oppression was just as important as racial oppression.
Mm.
And so I was very excited to meet Cesar Chavez and to hear about, what they were doing in California. And it's funny because maybe 5 years ago now, but his daughter was in my husband's public policy class.
Oh,
Cesar
wow.
Chavez's daughter, yeah, and his wife is still active, Dolores, and so he got to meet the two of them. I wasn't there, but so
Wow.
they no, but they but and the purpose of that course was about how do we use our position as policy advocates to support justice.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you're looking through the multiple lenses that you've experienced in multiculturals and everything else, looking at Cesar Chavez, Martin Luther King inspiration. What do you say about us today? What lens do we need to look at the work of what is before us today as a nation? Um, and let's just start with the nation first. The globe is something else. Let's start with the
The
nation.
globe, man, the globe. Yeah. Oh man, we're really messing up around the globe. I mean, that's another thing that leaks to the question you're asking. When I first started traveling as a young consultant, and I would go to both. My first trips were I had a project in the Netherlands, and then I had a project in I went to Cape Town but the first trip was to I want us to Zimbabwe.
Hmm.
And the thing that was so deep was everybody kept saying the United States is such a beacon of light for the
Hmm.
world around democracy.
Hmm.
And having grown up under segregation and having seen this dynamic that we're saying that it didn't really change for so many people, but that the policy we had the benefit of people don't like to be seen as, bad people. But that we don't have that anymore, but we had that then. But it was like I was like, oh man, they really don't know what the United States is. They don't really see all of it. We got a lot of positives, but it ain't all that.
Right,
So that was back then. I used to feel like we're living a lie kind of thing.
right,
So it's not so we shouldn't be surprised. And yet I think that, those of us who survived the Middle Passage, we got to and who have been able to thrive, we keep hope alive when we do. I mean, we get depressed, but we keep it alive.
right.
And so I can also see the ways in which I have King said this in the speech that he did to the psychologist. He said that we took our eyes off the ball,
Mhm.
and we did not recognize that this work is much more insidious. To address this is much more insidious than we thought. So
Wow.
I use that sometimes in my talks. The exact quote that he had, that was it's so true that and I think it's also the spirit of, of humanity, that many indigenous people, as we're in touch with our indigeneity, we want to stay in harmony with people, right? And with the land. And so that energy is what the world needs now.
Yeah.
And we lost it, right? We lost it.
Well, and it seems like there's this wave that overtook us last November, and we're living into a different reality right now. And so much of the work around racism, and just all the stuff that's there, just the isms that we're faced with today, really does seem overwhelming on so many levels. And people keep asking me, so okay, Robert, where's the hope and the work that you continue to do, and
Mhm,
where's what's the foundation by which we need to continue to go forward?
mhm.
And a lot of people, they're not ready for that. They're still stuck at I'm still stuck.
Yeah,
I'm still
yeah,
overwhelmed by all of this. So from the politics to now how it's beginning to impact people socially, to how people are saying, well, in this last election, I didn't vote for this current administration, but now I'm being impacted by this administration in ways I didn't think I was going to be impacted.
hmm
And so I'm trying to, maybe you can help us pull a little bit of a lens back to say, here's the focus we need to be aiming at now. Not that it's not that one thing will do it, but what is one thing that maybe we can start
yeah,
focusing on to get us through the current, what I have been calling on some level, this political pandemic that we find ourselves in?
yeah.
How do we begin to get some antibodies in it?
Yes, yes. And I really think that analogy, that speaks to me so strongly. I think the first thing is to remember that we have been here before.
Mm,
We have been here before.
mhm,
And you're right, what you're saying, those of you, those born after 1964, I often ask that in workshops, who was born before, after. If you're born after 1964, your lived experience was of a moment of transition. It totally. And that's not to say that was true for everybody, but that was largely true, right?
well, that's what y'all worked and fought for.
That's right. And it was largely true. And there's a really powerful, I'm going to send you this too. This is Medgar Evers University, a Black woman lawyer, talking about the work for those who grew up after 64, who really didn't know what it was like.
Okay.
And but what she says, and which is what I think, and I'm sure you agree too, because that's why you're doing this, is that we have to recognize that we have been here before, and
Okay.
that the context is different,
Right.
but this experience of being pushed back is
Mhm.
not different. That's. And
Yeah.
so how do we learn from the lessons of the past, as well as what do we do differently, right? So I think that's really the first step, is to realize that we have both an ancestral memory of this, if we come from the descendants of native people or other indigenous ways that we would have come to this earth. And also if we're the descendants of people who created this. I was talking to a white woman, my neighbor, in fact, she reached out to me the other day and said, "How are you doing?" And she looked at me with this, "How are you doing?" And I was like, how she's really saying how she's doing. I said, "I'm fine. I've been
You're
here
doing
before." And then, but what was good is I said, I'm doing all right. I'm hanging in there, got a lot of survival skills. And I said, "So how are you?" And she said, "I wanted to talk to you because I work with black women who say this is, we've been here before."
Mhm.
And I think that I underestimated underestimated what this time all means. So then she talked about herself and what her issues were. But it was interesting because she acknowledged that. She said, in the context of this, as a child of family who had enslaved people, I've wrestled with this, but I am clear that this is not okay. She works for the State Department of Education. So
Yeah.
she wants to sit, and she said, we've been trying to figure out how to keep ourselves sane, but maybe you can give us some ideas.
Wow.
So, that's what we have to find, those places where there's openings. And I'm going to follow up with her
Hmm.
because she has a win into two or three professional educational organizations that are committed to this work, like social emotional learning, and places where they care about morals and values and children. So I think it's one, recognizing we've been here before and that there are strategies, and second is making sure that you have a network in which you can get support and hear stories of hope.
Yeah.
and hear stories of pushback and resistance. I'm also staying, following several of the legal case, Cheryl Eiffel and
Yeah.
several of the folks who are on it at the, in the legal, from the legal point of view. So those are the things, and it is about acknowledging we're back in a time of, I want to say war, but a time of,
Yeah.
of crisis
Yeah.
around freedom and justice. And so this notion of we won't go back
Right.
is critical. I
Right.
have it all. I have it that side in my house. We won't, because and it's sad too, because one of the things that I think is not, I don't know how this is for you and for the people that listen to this, but in this part of Eastern North Carolina, there's I want to say a haze, sort
Mhm.
of a depression among particularly young people. They don't realize that they have power here. They have so much power and they don't see it. So that's my latest thing. I'm trying to, I just finished a little grant to see if we had a summer program last summer that was about why is voting important.
Mhm.
And it was successful to the extent that it got the attention of 3 or 4 young people.
Oh, great.
And it was sad because I realized just how stuck
Yeah.
these young people, and the school system ain't helping.
Yeah. Well, and as you're saying that, kind of tickles to me around the generational stuff,
Yes,
I
yes,
think about
yes,
the generational stuff that our folks have gone through,
yes,
like you said, the year of 1964 to 67,
yeah,
those who fought for what I'm going to say inherited,
yes, yes,
fought for
yes,
what I inherited.
yeah,
We had that lived experience of it got better.
yes,
Uh,
yes,
and we continue to improve in ways that we could. And I think we're now at a generational point of we don't understand what y'all are talking about.
that's right. And it didn't get better for them. It
And it
didn't
didn't
get
get
better.
better.
It
Yeah.
didn't get better.
It
No,
was,
it didn't. No, it didn't. And that's, yeah, no, I feel really, really angry about that actually. And also sad because I think it again, you know, dismantling the Department of Education was the worst thing they could do. And because so much of all of what, I learned doing segregation came from school
yeah.
and came from teachers who were telling us about, because they wanted us to know what the world was.
Right. Right.
And it didn't make us bitter and made us determined.
Yeah. And with the dismantling of the Department of Education, it's not only just that. I mean, the things that now have been rolled back. You know,
Yes,
I think about the Thurgood Marshall and taking on the Board of Education and all those things, all the things that were fought to overcome are now really in the balance.
right.
And what I mean,
Exactly.
well, people,
Exactly.
well, are we going to go back to that again? Well, the gate's open. I don't know if we're going to go there or not, but they've opened the gate. But I grew up on public education.
Yeah.
When I think about, my little elementary school and high school and outside of Troy, Alabama and Goshen, Alabama, I still strangely resonate with what I grew up on because
Oh, totally.
it's kind of like it's almost like a touchstone. Every now and then when something pops up that's going on, I go back and say, what did I learn or what didn't I learn about this, first of all, and what
Hmm.
educate myself around. I mean,
Right.
I grew up in Troy, there was Montgomery, there was Selma, there was Birmingham, all these are things around. And so now when we look at people who like, if this is all gone, they will have no reference as to what a lot of our ancestors fought for around voting rights, like John Lewis,
Right.
Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Jesse Jackson, and all these people. Like they won't have a glimpse of what that all means today, much less
Exactly.
5 years from now.
Right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. No, this is, and, I do think that it's an opportunity. It's also it's an opportunity because I don't know. I guess we needed to, if they say this about, if you use the analogy of 12 steps, people have to hit bottom. I mean, so societies have to hit bottom. It's like, because we knew, I mean, that's why we started Visions in the first place, is because we knew that without re-education, emotionally and cognitively,
Mhm.
this was going to happen again. We said that. We said when there's an ambiguous racial climate, this is going to re-emerge.
Yeah.
And here it is.
And here it is once again. And so I
Here
think
it
that we
is.
keep, it's one of those things that people say, if you don't learn it the first time around, you're going to be doomed to repeat it again.
That's right. That's
And
right.
I'm struggling with people now who are saying, well, we got to go. We needed to go. We have to go through this, or we need to go through this until to get us to the next thing.
Right.
I'm not buying that just yet.
No, no. We don't need this is self-inflicted as far as I'm
Yeah,
concerned.
I'm
This is
not quite buying that first time around. We needed to go through this, or
mm-mm.
to get us through this. I think there was other ways to get through to where we need to come across on. I know my time is bandwidth, but I want to read. I want to take us back to Cesar Chavez for just a moment.
Yes, good. I loved it. I love it.
And and we'll post some stuff. I'll post stuff with this around Cesar Chavez. But I wanted to get to a Cesar Chavez quote
Okay.
that was also very similar to someone else's quote. And Oh, I have it. Hang on just a second. I thought I put it in the spot where I could just pull it real quick. Oh, Cesar Chavez's most famous quote, uh, "Se si pudo," which translates to "Yes, it can be done."
Hmm.
And of course, we know where someone has got that
Yes, 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 we can. Yeah.
but I was just fascinated by this quote from him that many years ago, going through what they was going about. Yes, it can be done. And so when I read this quote, I almost got well, I didn't almost I got reinvigorated.
Good.
Like it reminded me, like, yes, it can be done. It's been done, and we can do it again.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
as we're
Exactly.
facing all the stuff we're nationally around, that we, like I said, we've been here before. It can be done, and I think we just have to find ways to equip the people with the tools to remind them that we've been here before, and we can get through
Well,
it again.
well, the person I was talking to you about from Medgar Evers, I'll send that to you because that's what she says is the Harlem Renaissance happened in the nadir of our experience.
Yeah.
As a example, her
Yep.
point being, we know how to shine and we know how to rise.
Yeah.
And in some ways, if we keep our eyes on what we do well,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, I don't
It-
know what you think about, for instance, I don't know what you think about rap music and hip hop and all that, but Kendrick Lamar,
mm.
he wasn't just sitting around acting like a victim.
And just for I mean, just think about how much power we get from that music too. I mean, we know the spiritual traditions and the message, but even that music still reminds us today we can get through this, and we're gonna do it. So,
We gotta do it. That's right. He said you got the right TV, the wrong person, but something. But
yeah,
the revolution, this revolution will be televised.
tell about
And it's still, people are still all over the internet, it's still going strong.
yeah,
So now my thought is what's the metaphor for how we do that to get people to understand that they can change the politics?
yeah, yeah. And I think that's and it's not gonna be, as we was talking earlier before the show, it's not gonna be just a one strategy thing. This is gonna be a multiple
There's going
strategy
to be multiple strategies. Yep. And
all over.
repeat, and we say in the model, repeated corrective experience.
Yes. Yep.
Repeated corrective experience. That's what we got to create.
Yep.
And I think that conversations like this that communicate, having other ways for people to think about it than the traditional ways that's an important step.
Yeah.
I appreciate you
Well, thank you so much for your
using
time.
your platform in that way.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your time. I appreciate this, and maybe at another point down the road, we'll bring you back to talk about some more stuff as we face all the isms that we're facing there today. But I want to give you the last word. Anything you want to say to the viewers before we sign off here?
Well, the thing that was thinking of saying a little while ago, I can say the other thing that keeps me hopeful is realizing that we're not, just like they don't show us all of what's going on in Palestine, they're not showing us all of what's going on in the United States in
Hello.
terms of the resistance.
Yeah.
30,000 people at Bernie's rally the other week.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So pay attention. Let's find the places where we see the energy and support them too.
Definitely, and of course, it can be done.
It
Uh,
can be done. That's
well,
right.
all right.
That's
Thank you
right.
so much, Dr.
Okay.
Batts.
You're welcome. Thank
Yeah,
you.
be well.
Okay.